Morning, everyone. Welcome to Labor and Health. First item on the agenda this morning is, all five of us are here, so roll call's complete. We're going to go through 151 as a committee. We'll move the bill, we'll work the bill, take a vote on the bill, amend the bill, whatever we're going to do, and then we'll move on to the other bill. So, committee, let's start with Senate File 151. Does anybody on the committee wish to move the bill? Moved by Senator Hutchings. Second by Senator Dockstader. Okay, committee, let's work through the bill. Discussion, ideas, amendments, whatever you got in mind. Push the green button and speak up. Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So page 2, line 7. And I'm going to offer several conceptual amendments, and the proponents, which there are 3 on this committee, hopefully can speak to their interest in, or speak to these. Page 7, after pharmacy benefit manager, insert PSAO, which is the definitions in the bill, Pharmacy Services Administrative Organization. And Mr. Chairman, I apologize for not actually bringing this as a standard amendment, but there's only this one insertion and then 2 deletions. So,
And you wanted to do what on that?
Mr. Chairman, so again, page 2, line 7, after pharmacy benefit manager, insert and PSAO, which, if you'll recall, is Pharmacy Services Administrative Organization. And then the same insertion would go after line 8, manager, with manager after PASO.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Senator Barlow, the benefit of that, can you tell me what?
So, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
are we clear on what the amendment is? If we're clear on that. So, Mr. Chairman, it's and I've visited with a couple folks, different folks, from different points of perspective on this issue. It seems like we're holding one side, one entity, the pharmacy benefit manager, to a standard, and this is all the transparency that's being asked for in this bill. And yet there's another entity that also interacts in this sphere, in this interface between manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers, and pharmacies, that may not be holding to a similar standard. I don't know that they provide all the same services, but if they are providing similar service, they should be held to a similar standard of transparency. So, Mr. Chairman, I would also suggest, it's been brought to my attention that the definition of Pharmacy Services Administrative Organization is not inclusive of all the services they may provide. So therefore, we either have a definition that's inclusive or expansive, or we include them in case they are, in the event that they're providing the same type of services in this marketplace that a pharmacy benefit manager is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Everybody understand that amendment? Go ahead, Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I don't think it's the intention to be hostile to the bill. I mean, we have been talking about pharmacy benefit managers for 2 years. This has been to federal court. It's been tossed to the states. We're trying to fix a clear problem here. And I just don't think we should even turn to a different direction here at this point in the game. So I'll be against an amendment like that.
Senator Barlow. Oh, Senator Hutchings, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Senator Bouchard. We're adding in the PASO, and they're not the same. It's like we're bringing in something into the bill that is not germane. So I too would resist that amendment, sir.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So germaneness actually is incorrect because it's actually part of the bill, your PSAO. Whether you want to apply this into the bill, that's a different question. My point is I don't think the those detractors of this amendment have explained what a PSAO is, or maybe we all don't know what a PSAO does. So my point is, if we want transparency, we should have transparency on both sides, all sides.
I
you,
agree,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair. I
Thank you.
agree.
you.
But
Senator Hutchins.
by adding, thank you, Mr. Chairman, but by adding this in, when he's talking about we don't know what they are and what they do, it doesn't make sense. At this point in time, I spent over 90 hours with these pharmacists working on this topic, and not once in all the webinars, data I've read, people I've talked to senators all over the country, not once has someone mentioned adding the PSAO into this. So I'm going to resist it and ask that the committee resist it as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further comments on the amendment? Senator Dockstader.
Just to know that I'll respect the sponsor's request.
Okay, let's vote on that amendment. Amendment as to add PSAO in the spots located on page 2. All in favor of that amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no.
No.
That amendment has failed. Further amendment suggestion? Discussion?
No, I have to.
Further amendments? Further discussion? Go ahead, Senator Barlow.
So one of the things that, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, so one of the things that came out in the testimony, including from the independent pharmacists, is they don't carry all the pharmaceuticals. Yet in this bill, we have 2 places where there's a requirement to use one is a retail pharmacist and one is a, so Mr. Chairman, the first one is page 3. And this actually, to me, is nonsensical besides, and this is lines 22 and 23. And this language says, restrict a person's choice of network providers for prescription drugs. So, Mr. Chairman, what I guess I need the proponents of this bill to explain to me, and my motion will be to strike lines 22 and 23, is there an instance where we pick and choose within a network? If pharmacies are within a network, do we say, nope, there's a network A and a network B? Is there differentiation within a network? Because to me, the way I read this is establish a network, and now they're saying there's certain things, certain pharmacy or places in the network you cannot go. Mr. Chairman, so my amendment would be to strike 22 and 23.
Comments, proponents, sponsors of the bill. Go ahead, Senator Hutchins.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if we go up to, and I'm just going over these quickly because I haven't seen these amendments. If we go up to the top, let me see, lines 8 of page 2, we see these are things the pharmacy benefit manager shall not do. And that is, it's saying that they shall not restrict a person's choice of network providers for prescription drugs. So we're saying that we don't want them to be able to restrict that person. We may need one of the pharmacists to come up and explain that happening, but that seems to make sense to me. You don't want them to restrict somebody, if that makes sense to you.
Senator Barlow.
Mr. Chairman, I think just made the point. If you can't restrict them, then why do we need to say it? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further discussion, Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're looking at one line on this on page 3. But what we're not looking at here is the development of these networks means that when they develop them, they're all going to be on the same playing field. This isn't about people who aren't in the network. This is about the pharmacists who are in the network. So that's the thing that's happening here is we have a PBM that is maybe owned by a big box store who is controlling the market. They are in the same network, but yet the client is being pushed to the big box. And even though they may both provide the same services, when you heard that they don't provide some of the drugs, that is universal across the field on certain drugs. That's not what the target of this bill is. This is about everybody that's in the network has to play by the same rules. So that's why I would caution you on that amendment.
Senator Barlow.
Mr. Chairman, I'll withdraw the amendment, withdraw all of my amendments, and let's just proceed to the bill.
Thank you, Senator Barlow. I appreciate that.
You know, and I have one comment on the bill. Actually, I have several, but one that came to my mind this morning and on page 5, talking about a person's choice of network providers shall include a retail pharmacy. Essentially, what we're talking about is they can't be required to do a mail-in pharmacy, although in some cases that would be to the tremendous benefit of the insurance of the providers to the plan. If we say, no, you don't have to, and the insured then goes to the retail pharmacy, which is fine, they're gonna go to the local pharmacy, but in the meantime, the cost is increased dramatically to the insurance, and thus to the entire group of those who are insured, be it state, be it a large employer, whatever. The cost may get driven up because they can't require a mail-in, which is significantly cheaper in some cases. And that concerns me. That we say, yeah, you can get it wherever you want to keep your local retailers in business, but we're not gonna worry about the cost. So I don't know that I have an amendment for that, but that paragraph on line 4,
Line
down through
4,
9,
4 through
on page
9.
5. And that is, you know, saying, we can't require you to go to a mail-in prescription order. So you get your drugs wherever you want, despite the fact that it may be more costly to the insurance, to the individual, ultimately to the insurance, or to whoever's providing it. That concerns me.
I understand, Mr. Chairman, and we can look into that further, but I got a call last year from a gentleman in Colorado. And I guess his insurance company is here in Wyoming, and he lives in the mountains. And he says his drugs are mailed to his house. And sometimes he's not home, and these are sensitive drugs, and he doesn't want them sitting on the front porch when he's miles away at times. So that option is so important for the Wyoming citizens and even Colorado citizens that are insured by the companies here to have that choice. And that's all I can say, Mr. Chairman. That choice is so important.
Go ahead, Senator
Thank
Doxer.
Senator Hutchins, would you be open to working with the chairman to adjust that part?
Senator Dockstetter, like I said, I'll look into it. I'll talk to the pharmacists that I've been working with and the groups across the nation to see how important that is. I don't have notes on that particular section, but I'm willing to work with anybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. That comes to me. Thank you.
Okay, committee, further discussion, amendments? Go ahead, Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to, go to page 5, and I want you to think about what's happening in this paragraph here. What we've seen is the big box.
Are you talking paragraph on page 4? Or on line 4?
Well, I actually skipped to 5 because I want you to look at the context of what's going on in the big picture.
Which lines?
Yes, line 4 on
Okay,
page 5.
go ahead.
So when we start incentivizing to steer customers away, I mean, you, on a big box store can actually bring a price so low as to move something. It's an artificial price. And that's what there has to be balance here. There has to be real balance. And look, if the pharmacists do not carry the drug, obviously they're going to go to an online provider for these certain drugs. I think the pharmacists have talked about that. That's not the purpose of the bill. Isn't to stifle that. It's to make sure that we're playing on an even playing field, and the big box store doesn't control something. And it just turns into the insurance companies that own the PBMs are playing that same game too. And sometimes they're working with both the big box store and the insurance company and giving a huge discount to steer it when they're not making a profit on that. They're just doing it to get the business on their end. So, I mean, I think that's what we just have to be careful is the balance that we're trying to bring forth in this bill. So.
Understood. I would just make a final comment. I think this is reflective of our society in general, if I may, is that, big box stores can buy things at a discount. They can buy, well, I'll go back to bananas because we talked about that last 2 years ago. they can buy millions of bananas. And thus they can sell them cheaper because they buy them cheaper when they buy them in bulk. And I don't know that drugs or pharmaceuticals are a lot different. And it makes sense that they can sell them cheaper. And I think it's reflective of our society. The big box stores are pushing the small retail stores out of business. We've seen it all over. And I don't know that we can stop that per se, but I think that's a piece of this as well. Go ahead, Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up, I think the problem comes in when not only are they have that practice, but then the PBM comes back and says, oh, we're not gonna pay this over here. And we're gonna withhold payment. And then you've got all these pharmacists that are delivering product over the counter and then not getting paid. So, I mean, they get to double dip on their practice and harm the other side. That's where we're trying to bring balance back.
Understood. Further comments, committee?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Senator Hutchins.
Thank you so much. One of the things I mentioned the other day on this particular piece of legislation on the bill was that we're kind of like in between on this issue. But while you're here in Cheyenne, if you have an opportunity, I'm sure the pharmacist at North Star would welcome your coming in and seeing what goes on in his pharmacy. Doesn't have to give you a long drawn out conversation, but I'm sure in 20 minutes he can show you what they're going through and it'll change your whole perspective. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Final comments by anyone on the committee before we call roll? No comments, let's go ahead and call roll, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On Senate File 151, Senator Barlow.
No.
Senator Bouchard.
Aye.
Senator Dockstader.
Aye.
Senator Hutchings.
Aye.
Chairman Baldwin.
No.
Sir, we have 3 ayes and 2 noes.
Senate File 151 has passed the Senate committee. And Senator Hutchins, you're presenting that on the floor? Okay,
Thank you.
very good. Committee, let's move on to our next bill. Do I have either one of the sponsors in here? Let's move on to the third bill in that case. We're going to move to Senate. Do I have any of the sponsors for that one in here? You're on that one. You want to present that one? Senate Joint Resolution N. It's the right of healthcare access constitutional amendment.
Mr. Chairman, so this is fairly simple, and I wasn't anticipating presenting it, so I need to find a constitution.
Oh, definite statutes. Six 38. Oh, no. Okay. And can we maybe make a call over to one of the other committees and see where the other senators are that we're going to present? Senator Beitman or Representative Andrew? They're in one of these committee rooms right next to us.
Constitution, Wyoming, Organic Hack.
Or Rothfuss for that matter. I appreciate it, thank you.
Or you want to wait then, stand at ease?
Just let's stand at ease. Committee will stand at ease for 1 minute.
1 minute.
Well, maybe 5.
Section 4. What we have here is failure.
For those who are waiting, we'll go about 2 or 3 more minutes, then we'll make a decision on what we want to do. We have several co-sponsors, or some co-sponsors in the room. We can make a decision if the co-sponsors want to present or if we want to lay those back. So we'll hang tight for a couple more minutes. Okay, committee, let's do this. Let's have Senator Barlow, if you wouldn't mind just walking through that briefly. We can take testimony on it. You can stay up here, that's fine. We'll do testimony. You chose Senator Hutchins. No,
So, Mr. Chairman, it doesn't take very long to walk through this. This is a repeal, Article 1, Section 38. Mr. Chairman, to remind the committee and the audience that Article 1, Section 38 was adopted in 2011 by the Wyoming legislature, ratified by the citizens of Wyoming as an amendment to the Wyoming Constitution. And in that, there are 4 sections. This would eliminate one of them. The first section, of course, talks about the right to make your own healthcare decisions, and then, of course, a legal representative, guardian, or parent. B is regarding paying for healthcare. C is allowing or providing that the legislature shall restrict the rights of an individual if it's for the health or general welfare of the people. So, Mr. Chairman, that's a summary of why this, of where we are. Section 38, as I said, this is a repealer of subsection C. And now that the prime sponsor is here, I will let him take over in his explanation and rationale for bringing this forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just
And I believe you owe a thanks to Senator Barlow for his 30 minutes of presentation.
It sounds like it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Barlow, for picking this up, since you guys are running a lot faster on your schedule than I expected today. So my apologies for being a little bit slow getting here. So, Mr. Chairman and Senators, this is a pretty straightforward amendment, obviously, and I just provided the context to clarify what the C provision is, the C paragraph. A little history. I was in the legislature when we originally passed Article 1, Section 38, the right of healthcare access, and it was generally a supported concept by everybody in the chamber, the idea of providing a right of healthcare access. Good idea. The key point of contention, though, was sort of in the details, and a lot of the debate was around this C paragraph. Is it truly an Article 1 right that you have as an individual if we add into it language that basically says, unless the legislature sees otherwise? We don't do that with our fundamental rights, our Article 1 rights. We enumerate those rights as reserved to the individual. We recognize unquestionably that enumeration is subject to compelling state interest. We understand that there's going to be circumstances where your rights are not unlimited, as well as circumstances where those rights interfere with either other people's rights or other constitutional rights that come into tension and balance. So there's always going to be that struggle. We know that from courts. We've seen that through history. We know that with our US Constitution and our particularly first 10 amendments of the Constitution, those rights that we hold so dear, and we look at the fact that in none of those rights does it say, unless the legislature says otherwise, unless Congress thinks that this right should be eliminated. You know, you have free speech, Senator, except if the legislature feels otherwise, deems accordingly. We don't write that in Article 1 because it's an enumeration of individual rights delineated from legislative rights or executive rights from the government. So at the time, I was certainly concerned about that, and I've remained concerned, and this is a constitutional provision, Article 1, Section 38, right of healthcare access, that has come up a lot over the past few years. It's come up with COVID. It's in particular with masking, with vaccinations. It's come up with abortion policy. It keeps coming up, and the debate around it keeps coming back to, oh, well, but the C paragraph lets us do whatever we want, which was the concern that I had when we passed it the first time, is this a right or is this not a right? And what is the court to do with a C paragraph where every other right in Article 1 is truly an individual right, which they're effectively used to dealing with? So after seeing all sides, medical marijuana is another one, right? Right to access healthcare, that comes up. Well, why are we inhibiting that right when we have Article 1, Section 38? And the funny thing about it is different people are on different sides of all of these issues, right? I don't know very many individuals that have purely claimed the Article 1, Section 38 and agreed with all of these policies. Almost 50-50 probably in terms of which ones you're aligned with Article 1, Section 38 and which times you're not aligned with Article 1, Section 38. And that's the beauty of an individual right. That's the tension that we're used to. We like our free speech. We don't like someone else's free speech. So I have my constitutional right to say what I want to say, but if you're saying something I don't like, I'm not sure that the Constitution protects that. That's the natural tension. But based on everything we've heard over the last few years, based on the disagreement, I felt it was a good time to remove paragraph C. And if we're going to have a constitutional right of healthcare access, paragraphs A and paragraph B are things that we should all fundamentally agree with as a first approximation, and then recognize that there will be tension in the details. The best way for us to identify and enumerate individual rights is to take the C paragraph out and give the right back to the people. That is all this does, is say no. It's not up to the legislature. You, the people, voted for a constitutional right of healthcare access as an individual right in Article 1 of the Wyoming Constitution. We don't need to put an asterisk next to it any longer. Let's give the people the opportunity to vote and decide whether they want the legislature to put the terms and conditions on their right to healthcare access, or whether they just want that right for their own. That's why I brought Senate Joint Resolution 10. And again, I understand that everyone on this Senate committee, everyone in the legislature, everyone in the audience likes Article 1, Section 38 some of the time, and dislikes Article 1, Section 38 some of the time, depending on their personal views and philosophies on all of the healthcare-related issues that we talk about at any given time. But the best solution to that is to give the right to the people and let people decide to the greatest degree that we can, instead of reserving it to the legislature and putting the ball in our court as if we're, the overlords of the people as opposed to the representatives of the people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for the senator? Senator Hutchins, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Rothfuss. I have to agree with you on a lot of the comments you made. I, for one, don't like changing the Constitution at all. I think we should limit it as much as possible. But I'm going to have some disagreements here. The people voted on this. I was not a proponent of it. I wish we never did it, but we did. And the people said yes. And when you said that the legislature isn't the overlord, we represent the people. So the people vote us into office to say, hey, I want you in there to help me in these areas where I don't understand, I don't know, whatever. So we're there for a reason, and that is to help the people. And when this happened, again, I wasn't happy, but now when I look at the day we're living in, the things we're doing, when we look at COVID, we look at the masks, we look at abortion, we look at the vaccine mandates, we look at what we talked about yesterday with the mutilation of children. Sometimes somebody needs to jump in and say, whoa, medically, we're going too far. And that's where I see this now as one of the most important things we could ever have done. I didn't like it at the beginning, but now, like I say, it's a safeguard. As you guys like to say, it's a tool in the toolbox. So I think we, the people, as legislators, are actually in here for a reason. And what are your comments on that? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Rothfuss.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I'd say my comments on that would be the same as others might feel if we added this C paragraph to the Second Amendment of the US Constitution. If we added it to the First Amendment of the US Constitution. Oh, we just need a provision here, shall not be infringed, but the legislature may determine reasonable and necessary restrictions on those rights. It's good when you agree with it. It's bad when you disagree with it. At the end of the day, it's not an Article 1 right if it just has the strings attached. It's just a feel-good. The people didn't have the opportunity to vote on it without the C paragraph. That's not a thing you can do at the ballot. We write what goes into the Constitution, and they get an up or down vote. If you gave those two alternatives, I would bet overwhelmingly that the people would have said, are you kidding me? The legislature telling me what to do with healthcare? That's between me and my doctor. As it should be.
Quick follow-up.
Go ahead.
I agree with you again, but I thank God our founding fathers didn't add that. But I also thank God that we did. Thank you.
Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss. I can see the wisdom of putting the legislature involved. They are elected by the people. All of us have a good understanding of those who sent us to office. Having that said, could you give me the reason why you went after this specifically? Was there an instance or an event or something that you said we need to remove C?
Senator Rothfuss.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, each of the examples that we discussed where any time Article 1, Section 38 has sort of been raised over the past decades, 12 years since we've had it in place, it has always been this argument. Article 1, Section 38 protects my right to ... That's what one side says. The other side says, oh yeah, but the C paragraph says, it doesn't really matter because the legislature is in charge of what you do for your right to healthcare access. Those are the two sides of every healthcare related issue that we've heard over the past 12 years, which, Mr. Chairman, Senator, is what we discussed in the Senate as being the likely outcome of codifying the legislature's ability to override your Article 1 rights. And again, I understand we, the legislature, think pretty highly of ourselves and we like the power. We think that we make good decisions, always, and we think that the will of the majority in each chamber is always going to be right. I'm sure every Congress, every legislature generally thinks that as well, but there is a reason why our Bill of Rights doesn't have a unless the Congress says so. There's a good reason for that. I am very thankful that the folks at that Constitutional Convention and then afterwards when they were preparing the amendments to the Constitution to get it passed, somehow it just never came up from the people. You know what we really need though? We need to make sure that Congress can override our rights. I think that was literally antithetical to the purpose of the Bill of Rights. And it's antithetical to the purpose of Article 1. Article 1 is individual rights. There is an article, as we know, in the Wyoming Constitution that is specific to what the legislature can and should do. It's a separation of powers, and Article 1 comes first for a reason, because it's the individual that is at the core of everything we do.
Thank you.
Senator Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I kind of have to chuckle because I heard you say something about the Second Amendment, and and it's kind of funny because you don't agree with my opinion of the Second Amendment, which is what you kind of just recited. And I am going to have that soundbite on you for the rest of my life. But that said, you know, because you will use all those same arguments on the Second Amendment to withhold rights and to push back at a guy like me, but yet now you're trying to flip it around here. So, I mean, the reason this is here, and we both know very well why this is here, because that discussion on the floor back then, I mean, people, even in this committee, don't know that I was the guy that put this bill in Senator Nutting's hands back then. I helped her run her election. She was a provider, healthcare provider that was against Obamacare. And that's what the purpose of this legislation was. It was to you know, have people have their right to make their healthcare decisions. But there is a caveat here, and it's there because you very well know that on the other side, there's a pro-life battle, and the determination is the legislature can step in and protect life, which that has been upheld in higher courts. So that's kind of what this is. It's a safety net. So, I mean, the problem comes when if this is abused, and then, you know, as much as you like to talk about democracy, that's when that comes into play, and those people either get reelected or unelected. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents. I'm against the bill, but I appreciate your comments on the Second Amendment.
Wouldn't you agree?
Mr. Chairman, again, and it wasn't a coincidence, obviously, that I mentioned the Second Amendment, because I certainly understand how well it would be embraced if we took that C paragraph and put it on other rights, those rights that are dearly held. What it comes down to is that there are rights that we like, and they're the ones that we embrace. Other people's right of healthcare access, quite honestly, is not something that everyone embraces. We say we do. When this bill was run, it was against a particular piece of federal legislation, the ACA. But at the time, it didn't have the appearance necessarily about truly being about healthcare access for the people, an individual right, an Article 1 right. It was a constitutional shaking of the fist at the US presidential administration at the time. And the C paragraph is effectively the proof for that. It says, we're not serious. We don't really want the people to have a right. We just want to protest. I want the people to have a right. I want to expand liberty and freedom. I want to encode this particular right into the Wyoming Constitution in the way that it is a right, and not just a protest against one piece of legislation at one point of time for one administration. It's a good constitutional right, and it was a good idea, but it was never serious because of the C paragraph at the time.
Further questions, comments, committee? Senator Hutchins.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Senator Rothfuss, I'm just going to step back just a bit. When I thought about running for office, I sat and I read the Wyoming Constitution. This is my little commentary on the Constitution. And on these pages here, this is where it said, the legislature shall. And you know what? That scared the life out of me.
Good.
I'm like, what am I getting myself into? This is serious. I take this serious. I don't come in here thinking I'm above or beyond anybody else. When I knock on people's doors, I tell them, I'm your servant. I'm gonna do things the best way I can, but I'm gonna try to use this as my guide. So what's in here is my guide. So I'm not proud. I'm not above everybody else. I'm scared a lot of times that I'm not gonna make the right decision. So I do my best to do that. And I believe my fellows do the same. At least I hope they do. So with that question, would you like to also remove Article 7, Section 20 out of the Constitution as well? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Rothfuss.
Mr. Chairman, in response to that, I don't have my copy with me. I thought I did actually, and
That's okay.
don't have it. So if a good senator would enlighten me on which one that is. I'm sure I've read it, but
Here you go. Down at the bottom where most of the makeup is. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So one thing I'll say at the beginning is this is in Article 7, which means it's literally the duties of the legislature, legislative branch or legislative department. Oh, no, I'm sorry, this is the education. But again, it's enumerating responsibilities of the legislature with regard to education. So it's not in Article 1. And from that standpoint, it at least makes some sense. But so that everyone knows what we're looking at, duty of the legislature to protect and promote health and morality of people, as the health and morality of the people are essential to their well-being and to the peace and permanence of the state. It shall be the duty of the legislature to protect and promote these vital interests by such measures for the encouragement of temperance and virtue, and such restrictions upon vice and immorality of every sort as are deemed necessary to the public welfare. Would I like to remove that? Probably. Not all of it. The health aspect, I think, is important, but the idea that the legislature at this point in time is a morality police is probably a bridge too far.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Bouchard. Form it as a question, please.
Form it as a question, that's funny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I'm asking here if you remember the discussion on the floor, because I do remember it. And that actually came out in discussion when this was crafted. And I'll tell you right off the bat that this was not the way the original bill was written, but as you know, we create sausage. And so that's how, I don't think this is perfect, but I'm not willing to take it away because of the basis of the conversation that pointed to that part of the Constitution when they brought this in here. And so I'm asking, do you remember that discussion on the floor?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, absolutely. And I remember offering an amendment that would have provided the opportunity to vote on a pure Article 1 right as well, which was about 2 sentences long and simply said the right of healthcare access was an individual right to be protected by the state. So a simple opportunity was availed. I remember the debate on it, which was basically that, oh, we can't let people actually have control over their right of healthcare access. That's my summary. I don't know that it was stated explicitly like that, but that's the reality. The interesting thing, Mr. Chairman, is the vote on this at this point in time is not a vote that passes the constitutional amendment. It is a vote, and particularly to the senator's point, about being a servant of the people. It's simply a vote to provide the opportunity to the people of Wyoming to decide what they think this should mean. It's their constitution. We are their servants. And the idea that we need to withhold from them the right for them to decide whether they want the legislature explicitly to have the rights to deny them their views and approach and beliefs on right of healthcare access. seems antithetical to what I'm hearing in terms of trying to protect and uphold people's freedom and constitutional rights, because that's what we would be doing by voting no. An explicit denial of providing the opportunity to the people, not passing it on their behalf. We don't have that authority. The only authority we as a legislature have is the authority to offer them the question. And that's what I'm asking of you. And if each of us individually wants to go to the poll and vote no because we want the legislature to have control, I would understand that. We're the legislature. But it's my guess that the 580,000+ Wyomingites that aren't in the legislature would rather just have it as a constitutional right.
Okay, absent further questions. Oh, one last quick question.
I'll try to make it quick, but you know, it's kind of interesting as I read that section. Just, it says the legislature may. It didn't say it shall do that. And it says determine reasonable and necessary restrictions on the rights granted under this section. And it's only to protect the health and general welfare of the people or to accomplish the other purposes set forth in the Wyoming Constitution. So it's not like we're the boss of anybody. It just says, you know, we may step in and say, oh, this is unreasonable, what you're trying to do. Like I said, what we talked about yesterday in committee, some things people just don't believe are reasonable. Few people did, 10 believed they were reasonable or weren't reasonable, 20 believed they were. So this is a may, not a shall, and it's to protect. So I see it as being very reasonable. And if you look at it again, don't you?
Go ahead, Senator Ruffins.
Mr. Chairman, no, I don't, because of where it's at. It is a granting of authority that places the legislature above the individual on a right of healthcare access. And again, the example I used a few minutes ago, but I think it's a reasonable example, is the US Second Amendment. By that analysis, it should be okay for us to tack on another provision that says, after shall not be infringed, the Congress may determine reasonable and necessary restrictions on the rights granted under this section to protect the health and general welfare of the people to accomplish the other purposes set forth in this, and it would be US Constitution at that point. And Senator, if you feel that that would be just as good, and in fact, a little bit better, because then a body of elected officials can get together and infringe upon it as they see fit, because we elected them to do so. If that's an equivalent, then I respect your argument, even if I would continue to disagree with it. But it would be consistent if that was something that would be agreed to. But I don't think any of the five of you, nor anyone in either chamber, would write that into the US Constitution, because I think everyone would feel that that is an egregious transgression of rights.
Okay, let's move on and take some public testimony if we could. Anyone in the room wish to testify to this bill? Come on up, sir. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Push and get the green button if it's not on there. Is the green still on? A green light?
Oh, green light's on.
Okay, go ahead, sir. Introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Tom Schmidt. I'm from Laramie, and I represent only myself. I'm here for another bill, actually, but this came up. But I've always been, I guess, intrigued by it a little bit. When this came out, I voted against it. When, if they would have stopped with Section A, I could have voted for it. Everything after Section A is not constitutional language. It's statutory and belongs somewhere else. Like Section B says, any person may pay and a healthcare provider may accept direct payment. That's the language of permission. May pay. It doesn't belong in the Constitution, maybe somewhere else, but that's the language of permission. I don't think it should be there. Section C, I'm not even going to get into because there's so many ifs, buts, and ands in there. And even Section D says the state of Wyoming shall act to preserve these rights from undue governmental infringement. What is undue governmental infringement? Who decides? I would scrap everything after Section A. And I wrote essays about this when it first came out, but I voted against this when it came out. But if they would have just stopped with Section A, because that's constitutional language, it fits with the flow of the rest of the Bill of Rights. But I don't have a copy here, but if you look through the Bill of Rights, I don't think you'll find the word may in there anywhere. Language like that. And Section C it's just way too many ifs, buts, or ands in there, but that's just my opinion, gentlemen and committee members, but I would scrap everything after Section A. Thank you.
We appreciate you coming and testifying. And you still get to testify on another bill if it comes up. Anyone else in the room wish to testify? Seeing none, do we have anybody online that wants to testify to this bill?
We do, Mr. Chairman. We have a Laura Pearson online with her hand up.
Okay. Laura, once you can hear us, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, can you all hear me?
We can. Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. First, I'm Laura Pearson, Laura Tolliver Pearson from Southwest Wyoming. I'm a sheep rancher and school bus driver. I want to say first that I appreciate Senator Hutchings and Bouchard's comments on this bill. I am against this bill. If this is passed, it would prevent legislators from putting any restrictions on any surgical procedures, whether it be abortion, late-term abortion, sex changes for minors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, but sometimes we need our legislature to step in to protect our most innocent Wyomingites. The problem is, many times voters don't know what they are voting for. This is why we elect our leaders. Many voters don't really do their research on what they are voting for. And I just want to reiterate that I didn't. Up until 2 years ago, I went to my dad's house and asked him, what should I vote for? So I know that a lot of our constituents don't really do the research on what they're voting for, who they're voting for, any of that. So to put this vote out to the public, to your constituents, I think would be devastating. I think that they would think that they were voting for something great, but this is why we elect you to help us with this. And we need you to protect us. Thank you for allowing me to testify.
Any questions for Ms. Talafaro? I got a question for you. It doesn't really concern a bill. Pardon my voice. I'm sorry, but you're talking about people not recognizing what they're voting for. How would you fix that? How would you make that better so that people know what they're voting for, what they're voting on?
Well, I just think that there's such disenfranchisement on the voter side right now. You know, I mean, they go to the polls, maybe they do. I mean, I know probably 2/3 of my bus barn this year said that they were not going to vote. What was the purpose of it? You know, because they don't believe, you know, I mean, they're just so disenfranchised right now, especially after the 2020 election. So I don't know how you get the word out to people, how you get people to do their research. I don't know how you do it, other than people just need to wake up like I did and realize what is going on in this country and realize that we are about to lose this country. you know, but there are so many of your constituents that are just busy. They have families, they have jobs, and they just don't do the research. They don't really realize what they're voting on. And I don't know how to fix that. Other than, you know, I don't know how to fix it. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I appreciate your thoughts on that. I think something we all need to work on. Thanks for coming to see us today. I see another person online.
We have Wendy Volk. Mr.
Wendy?
Chairman.
Hopefully we get a bigger picture of you. Right now, all I can see is your eyes.
About that. Is that better, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wendy Volk of Cheyenne, Wyoming, speaking on behalf of myself. I just want to tell you is that I am totally in favor for this legislation. I truly believe if every member of our legislature of both chambers were physicians like yourself, I would trust all of our legislature with having this ability to make medical decisions for me. However, Mr. Baldwin, I would come to you. If you were in my community as a physician's assistant, I would come to you for medical advice. I wouldn't go necessarily to someone who is not a licensed medical professional in our state for medical advice. And I just think that that is a really dangerous right for someone who is not medically trained to be making decisions for myself, my family members. I don't think they're qualified. And so I am in 100% support of this legislation. I think there's other areas where you, as elected members of our state, can put legislation in place. But on this particular one, I feel very strongly and hope that you will vote in favor of this, this bill. I appreciate it. I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Volk? Seeing none. Thank you very much for visiting with us today.
Thank you.
Anybody else online? One final call in person. Seeing none, we'll close public testimony. Committee, what's your wishes? Move the bill by Senator Marlowe. Excuse me?
Move the joint resolution.
Move, yeah, the joint resolution 10. Okay, discussion committee, Senator Dock's there. Oh, I thought you were putting, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, committee, I am comfortable actually with the language and see reasonable and necessary restrictions, and so I'll be in opposition of the resolution. Thank you.
Anyone else, committee, Senator Bouchard?
I just want to clarify on section B what that piece of language was directed at. And it's directed against a single payer system. That, I mean, sadly, this constitutional amendment has not been used by the executive branch in order to push back at federal healthcare regulations. But section B is directed expressly at a single payer system. And that's why that language is there. And so that is one reason that to come in a second time on section C, it's there to also say the legislature can refuse a single payer system. But I think there's another, you know, when I was involved in this, interestingly, the abortion side of the aisle, they said, oh, look, Bouchard doesn't know that now we can use this section of law or constitution to defend abortion. But this little piece here got in the way. And I think that's why it's kind of under attack now. So, and I don't think that's the bill sponsors, that's not his wishes on this, but I think there is an element out there that's why you will find some support on the outside. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. Further discussion? Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's fascinating to me, the last two times that we've added things to Article 1 of the Constitution, both times we put may in them. Both times we gave outs. You look at the next one, which is 39, it says subject to the this is about the heritage of hunting and trapping wildlife. Subject to regulation as prescribed by law. What the heck kind of right is that? What does that even mean? Our statutes are stronger than that. Our statutes are stronger than that in our green books. So, Mr. Chairman, obviously I am for this bill. I actually appreciate the comments of the gentleman that spoke from Laramie about he voted against it. I voted against it too, for the same reasons. Now, I recognize what Senator Bouchard is saying about B, because B, actually, there is a prohibition against penalties or imposition of penalties and fines. That I think is important. That is something that's elsewhere in the Constitution as well. You can't, anyway, so, but C and D, I mean, that's just too much power for too few people used for various different purposes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further comments, Senator Hutchins?
Just a quick one. I appreciate all the comments, and it goes to my first comment. I don't like messing with our Constitution, and when we start doing it, this is what we come up with. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be on and against.
Further discussion? I'll just throw in my 2 cents as chairman, is it, and I honestly, I voted against it simply because of C, when it was brought up. I guess I will probably vote for this because I'm always a proponent of putting things out to the people. I think it's important that we let the people make a decision. I don't think this is us making the decision, and I think it's important. And that's the reason I'll be an aye vote. I think that the people need to have an opportunity to look at this again, perhaps in a different context. We look at everything right now through the COVID lens and through those lenses, and I think it's changed things. I would appreciate if we could get rid of the COVID lenses, if it would just go away. It's not going to, but that's the reason I'll be an aye vote. So with that, let's go ahead and call roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Joint Resolution 10, Senator Barlow.
Aye.
Senator Bouchard.
No.
Senator Dockstader.
No.
Senator Hutchins.
No.
Chairman Baldwin.
Aye.
We have 2 ayes and 3 noes.
Senate Joint Resolution 10 has failed the Senate Labor and Health Committee. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Rothfuss. Now, with that said, let's take a brief repause here and take one more opportunity to see if we can find the sponsors for the other bill.
Mr. Chairman, I did find Senator Beitman, and he sends his regrets. He's presenting a bill to another committee this morning and asked if you could lay back his bill until Friday.
Okay, we will do that. We will lay this bill back to Friday. This bill will be second.
I want you guys to have to defend that bill in the context of this.
Okay, thank you. That's all for committee today.